There's a lot of coaches who have been fired that surprised some. There's some coaches that have been retained that have surprised some. So there's a lot to dive into here today, obviously.
Yeah, crazy morning so far. I thought I was about 60-40 that they were going to keep Lou at the end of that Steelers game. And then obviously this morning I had to rush and change a thumbnail about 5 minutes before the show started because the Bengals decided to have some organizational change. And I think this is probably the best possible sign for how the offseason is going to go. This is something the Bengals don't normally do. And it wasn't just Lou. They fired their O-line coach, linebackers coach, and I think that's an empty line coach. I think that's a really, really good start to this offseason, something we didn't necessarily expect the Bengals to do. They don't do this kind of thing very often, and to kick off the offseason after a, uninspiring season by, going a little bit outside of the organizational box that we all operate in when talking about how to fix this team, maybe they're going to continue to operate that way. And I think step number 2, we all agree, is re-signing T. Higgins, but firing Lou Anarumo makes me very, very confident in the way this organization's headed and the mindset Mike Brown has as we move forward.
Yeah, I'll say this. The Bengals just went through one of truly the worst seasons you could go through. I know the record says they finished above 500. Anybody who watched the Bengals this season know that that's probably not an accurate representation of what exactly went on this season. There's Super Bowl odds. There's Super Bowl hopes and dreams in Cincinnati. There's AFC Championship hopes and dreams every single season. There's pressure to be that top 1, top 2 seed in the AFC come playoff time. There's expectations. And when you don't live up to those, it's hard for me to sit here and say, as Joe Burrow, goes on another year of his contract, that there's not even more pressure now not making the playoffs 2 years in a row. It had to happen. You had to show the fan base and you had to show the media that you're a serious organization. I think if you willingly let Lou Anarumo stay in Cincinnati after what transpired this season, his defense being the worst you could even imagine, the worst of all time, letting him stay with the hopes and expectations that this franchise, this team, that the players in the locker room have, it wouldn't work out. It wouldn't work out. I'm not shocked at all by this. I am shocked at least by how swift it came. I thought we'd wait a little bit maybe, and maybe the ownership, Mike Brown and the Blackburns would wait and maybe until we all cooled off a little bit. But I'm glad they did it now. I'm glad we're going to get a head start finding some coaching replacements here and starting the draft process, because there is a lot of work to do. Probably more work this offseason than we've ever had.
Yeah, there's at one point last week I heard you guys say, like, the talks, and I think you and Craig talked about it, Jake, about, did Anarumo save his job over the last couple of weeks? And it kind of felt like it was trending in a direction where maybe none of those guys were going to lose their job. Obviously, Zach Taylor, I think we were pretty confident wasn't going to lose his job. Pitcher, we don't even mention him. There's no reason to. The offense did what it was supposed to. And, Anarumo's name got brought up for a while, but it's like at the end of the day, they started playing better down the stretch. But at the end of the day, I always felt confident that some names were going to move, because I don't think you could vastly underachieve the way the Bengals did this year and just move on into the offseason and next season as if that didn't happen. So heads were going to roll. But at the end of the day, obviously Anarumo had to answer for the defensive struggles. But at the same time, was this an Anarumo issue, not getting the most out of this defense? Or is this one of those, the ingredients were there, they just need to go get the right chef? Obviously, this team's going to look different next season. I think they're going to add to this defense, no doubt. But did Anarumo, was there meat left on the bone? Did this defense have more to it and he just not push the right buttons? Or is this a roster issue? Did it matter that they moved on from Anarumo? Could they regret moving on from Anarumo if it's all said and done? Because if they add defensive pieces and they look better next year, is it because they moved on from Anarumo, or is it because they moved on or they added pieces? That's going to be the big question I have. This is a guy that was in the not running, but was constantly mentioned to get a head coaching job not even 2 years ago, and now is just straight up let go by the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm not saying it was the wrong decision. Somebody had to answer for the struggles this year, but man, oh man, that's going to be interesting to see if Anarumo was the problem or if it was the roster at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think, funny enough, the thing that did Lou Anarumo in was the defense playing better towards the back half of the year. When we put the young guys in that he refused to play, they took a step up. When the players like Mike Hilton, Von Bell, the leaders of this defense, said Lou Anarumo simplified the play calls, dumbed down the coverages, and everyone started to play better, I think when most people, myself included, were pointing to that as, oh, this defense is coming into their own, maybe Lou's saving his job. Now with hindsight after they fired him, I think that was proof that early in the year he was stubborn, wasn't willing to adjust his system to his roster, to the pieces he had. And once he finally did, this defense took a step up to a point where if they were playing at the point they played at for the last 5 weeks all year, this Bengals team's in the playoffs. And we don't have an obituary today. We're talking about, going to Buffalo or even higher on the list in terms of seeds in the wild card. This defense was terrible all year long and then up above middle of the pack for the last 5 weeks. So I think that, though we thought it was Lou saving his job in the moment, I think that was a pretty big indictment on him, that he wasn't willing to play guys like Jordan Battle early in the season. Even the injuries we saw to DJ Turner and Dax Hill, those guys were shoved down the depth chart earlier in the year. And when they came in, they started to shine. So I think Lou, as the season progressed, we started to see that though there are roster problems, there are player personnel problems with this defense, he was a problem as well. And when you can't fire 11 guys, all 11 players, then you fire the DC. And it seemed like a pretty easy solution to me. I expect Lou Anarumo to be hired by the end of the offseason, I would say pretty quickly. I think he's going to be a DC next year, no doubt, and I think he'd be one of the first names off the market. I think he's highly respected in the league. We saw what he's done when he had high-end talent on that defense, and when he did, he was one of the best DCs in football, so especially in high-leverage moments, and he's great in the red zone, and that's what championship teams value. So I think he's going to get hired somewhere else, and I think he's going to do a damn good job, and we might look back on this and say it was a mistake, but I think that you had to make a change. We know that Zach Taylor's not going to get fired. We know 11 positions on defense aren't going to get fired. So you got to move on from someone, change the message in the locker room, and naturally that's going to be Lou. Was he a scapegoat? Maybe. But was he the best one we had? Probably. So I think it makes sense to fire him. It's time for a change. And I think how this move gets viewed comes down to who the Bengals hire. And I don't know if we want to get into it now, but I certainly have a short list already for guys I want.
Yeah, I don't think Kinner brought up the fact that, was the defense talented enough no matter what? Could a better defensive coordinator come in here and made the changes? Probably, maybe. I don't think he was fired because of the lack of, talent on the defense. I think he was fired because of what Jacob just said. When you fail twice in a row with a healthy Joe Burrow, someone's going to leave. It's just a fact, and that's to maybe keep pressure away from the head coach, Zach Taylor. But somebody was going to answer for this. And Lou Anarumo, you can't look at this season and say he did anything that was worth a damn. And it sucks because I don't think he's a bad coach. I truly do think that the defensive inefficiencies go beyond coaching. Missing tackles is something that's taught so early on. Wrap a guy up. Right. You can only go out and practice and say, "Hey, Geno Stone, don't be afraid to get in the gap and make a tackle one time, make a play." Jermaine Pratt, please make a tackle. You can't enforce that every. I mean, these are grown men, professional athletes. They need to know better, and at some point, it goes beyond what the coach can do. Saying that, I do think there are things that the coach can do, like not let Sam Hubbard play an entire season on a broken foot, broken hand, broken wrist, broken collar. There's things that you can do where the defense won't look as terrible. And I don't think Lou did enough this season to warrant not being the scapegoat. He is 100% the scapegoat of this season. There is zero doubt in my mind that that's why he was fired. He was not fired because he was bad at his job this year. He was fired so they could answer to the media and to the fans that they still care.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a done deal once all season and every pundit on every network points to Joe Burrow and the season he had and the Triple Crown and the season Jamar Chase had and said these guys would be hoisting awards at NFL honors without the defensive play. And when every conversation around the Bengals is about the defensive play, you got to fire the DC. I think that your hand was basically forced here. And the only way the Bengals kept Lou around for next season is if they did a Bengals move in terms of respect for a guy who had done so much in in the past, and we already have to pay him, and blah, 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 blah. That's the only way they would do it. And we'd all talk ourselves into it because we've learned what to expect as Bengals fans. But this is a move that every other championship contending team would make, and we are in a championship window. We have to make these moves.
Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Again, Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here. This is Off the Bench. So we'll step away for a few moments. Obviously now with a couple vacancies on this coaching staff, Zach Taylor's coaching staff, Zach Taylor going nowhere, of course. What's next? Who are some of the names that you guys are looking at as far as where we sit today? Again, it's the Monday after the regular season officially comes to a close. It's all playoffs from here, but not playoffs for the teams that we follow, of course. So now it's all off-season talk. The draft, the 17th pick belongs to the Cincinnati Bengals for the draft coming up. So there's going to be a lot of that talk over the next couple of months, of course. So lots to still talk about when it comes to this Cincinnati Bengals team, no doubt. We'll